Welcome back to Basic as we focus on the I, imitation in basic. What does it mean to be like Jesus? And today we're doing it maybe a little different, not focused so much on behavior, but on what do we do with our whole life? What does it mean to follow Jesus in our vocations? And that might, vocation is a big word that, could mean, what you do for your job or how you, whatever station in your life, how do you serve Christ, whether it's as a parent or a grandparent or a neighbor or a citizen or in a career as a boss, as an employee. Like, what does it mean to imitate Christ in those situations? And there's a scripture where John the Baptist is instructing people about how to live their vocations, their lives, and people were coming to John the Baptist to be baptized, and so tax collectors were coming and soldiers were coming, and each of them asked, what should we do? And that question, I think, what should we do, is the question we're asking is, what does it mean to be a Christian soldier? What does it mean to be a Christian tax collector, or Christian accountant? And does our Christianity change how we live in those vocations?
Right. Right. And I think some lean themselves easier, right? Like if you're a teacher, then it's like, oh, well, of course, I'm using my spiritual gifting as a teacher. But yeah, if you have an accountant or if you're a scientist or, if you're something, in tech, you're wondering like, how does my Christianity at all align with this? But I think as a lot of these imitations it's like, how do you approach the other? Like, because a lot of these, even if you're at a little desk job and you're a remote worker, you're going to engage with people sometime, even if you're not in the customer service industry. And so, like, how do you engage your coworkers? How do you engage your clients? How do you engage the people across from you? And so when John the Baptist was asked this, right, the tax collector is told, don't take more than you need. Like, right? Take the taxes that you're supposed to collect. Don't line your pockets, right? Which is what tax collectors were doing at the time. So, right, proper ethics. And for the soldier, well, what am I supposed to do? How do I be a soldier and a Christian? And he was saying, don't extort money from people. So again, don't use your power to take from the vulnerable. And also, like, only do what you're ordered to do. Don't take upon yourself new orders that may or may not go well for you.
Yeah, it's serve your neighbor, not yourself, right? I think that's part of the way of Jesus in whatever career you're in or whatever job you find yourself in, that you're not just focused on yourself, that your job isn't just to make money, right? That your job is, how do I contribute to society? How do I serve my fellow employees? Or if you're the boss, how do I care for my employees? How do I make this company or project or whatever we're doing something good for the whole? That it's never just about yourself, about profit. You're looking for Christian results in whatever you're doing. And some of that's being honest, right? Like being a Christian is being honest. And so in every job, if you're an accountant, you're not cooking the books. I think of our accountant here at church, like my temptation is always to like, well, can't you make it like look nicer or like make us look better? And she's like, no, like
the numbers are what the numbers are.
The numbers. But I found they aren't. Like, you can do that. Like, you can, emphasize this and not this, and it would still maybe fall within accounting, but you have to have a higher standard to say, what's the Christian thing to do? Well, it's to be transparent, to help tell the true story so people can make good decisions, right? Like, and it's, so you're, even in something as, that seemingly doesn't, it's just numbers and, debits and credits, it's seemingly amoral, I guess. Like, there is a moral component to it. Like, what does Jesus ask us to do in being honest, being transparent, telling the truth? In our accounting.
Yeah. Well, and I think you can tell the difference for a person who truly is taking their Christian ideals to heart, right? Like the McDonald's worker can be awful to you, and right? They could spit in your food. They could just be rude to you, right? Or you could have the Christian that's like, I work at McDonald's. And like, this is a chance every day to engage in other people that are made in the image of God. And yes, they might be rude to me, but I'm not going to respond in kind, right? Like, or you have unfortunately the opposite, right? We've all probably experienced a toxic workplace, and like, what if that boss had chosen to do Christian ideals, had decided to be clear as kind? Unfortunately, there's even churches that have fallen into this category of toxic
Workplaces,
environments.
yeah.
And so, right, and so what does it mean to like see the vulnerable? Like, if you have a person that's only part-time, are they seen as part-time? Are they seen as lower? Are they seen as less than? That's not what Christians would be called to do in their workplace. I don't know. I think it's also important to like name that like Jesus had a side job, Paul had a side job.
Yeah,
The
Paul was a tent maker.
Paul was a tent maker. Jesus was a carpenter. Most of his disciples were fishermen. Matthew was a tax collector. He probably stopped being a tax collector, but because again, that was right one of those jobs that was like, what do I do? It's pretty amoral. It's a pretty bad job, an amoral job, and so. But I do think there's sometimes that Christians ask this, like, should I quit my job now that I've become a Christian? Maybe they like have finally kind of like come into this idea of like what it means to be Christian. Like, should I quit my job?
Yeah.
And my question is always, what is your job? Like, could you be just doing it better? Like, do you realize that you've been making choices in your job that you could be doing better? Or are you truly in a bad job? Right. Like, there are some bad jobs.
Right. If you're in an industry that the main product is antithetical to who
Right.
Jesus is, then yes, you may need to not be part of that, right?
Right.
Like, I don't know if you can be a Christian pornographer, right?
Right.
Like that's not, even if you're not doing any of the bad stuff. Like, I think if you can't be in that industry and still claim to be a follower of Christ. Like,
Right.
like there's industries that are like that, and there's probably financial firms that like they're tearing apart companies and livelihoods, and
Right.
the only focus is on the bottom line and the dollar, and it's just greed. Like,
Right.
you might, as a Christian, say, I can't be part of that, or a law firm that seeks to exploit people who don't know, don't have education, or it's taken advantage of some loophole that's just designed to harm people and profit the law firm. You might say, as a Christian, I can't be part of that. But there are also like industries where it's not so clear, and maybe you might be called to be a reformer in that industry, and some things it's just it's not good or bad what the company is trying to do. And so being a Christian in it is, how do I engage with my fellow employee, with the customer, with my boss in a way that shows who Jesus is.
Right.
Yeah. Margaret, go ahead.
No, well, that can be very powerful. I'm just thinking, like, if you had a Christian that was a prison guard, like how that could really like change a system or change how a prison ran. If a Christian with some vote of power could actually like change the way the prisoners were treated while they were there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and try to be a culture changer.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're in those, it might be a toxic culture, and you're the only kind person that the other person has to, an employee has to vent to and listen to, and or somebody you can advocate for them. So you're always kind of filtering through that. I was going to say, Martin Luther talked a lot about vocation and how, and not just in what your work is, but he talked about cobblers making shoes. Like, do it with high standards, as if you're making shoes for Jesus. And how would that change your attention to detail? If you make a mistake, you don't just let it go, like you correct it. It's because you're serving Jesus, and that is recognizing the image of God in everybody. That when we serve the other, we're always thinking of them in terms of Christ, and so that changes every vocation. But he also talked about parents. When you're a mother changing her child's diaper, like, think of, do it for the Lord. Like, that's a way of imitating Christ. Is no matter how mundane the task is, dirty the task is, a task that you don't like doing, like, have that attitude of, how can I do this to the glory of God? How can I do it as if I'm serving Christ himself? And that's part of vocation. That's part of imitating Christ in our work.
Yeah, I think it's a big, broad topic that really takes you to look at your own job and decide what does it look like to be a Christian in this role. As AI grows, there's going to need to be voices that are ethical we have a lot of power with AI to do a lot of different things. what are going to be our guardrails?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we often wish that God would just set up the guardrails, but God calls us to do the hard work of being a Christian, and he sent himself to come and teach us what to do. And so we have to listen. We can't just be like, oh, I don't know what to do. Nope, Jesus told us.
Right.
Listen to the other videos.
Well, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world, right?
Right.
Like it's a lamp on a, you don't put a bushel over the lampstand, but it's supposed to give light to the whole room. Like that's what Christians are called to do, is to bring light and salt. Like that salt's, a taste enhancer or preservative, but we're supposed to bring all these good things that come with Christ into every situation we're in.
Right.
And so we're the ones who set up the guardrails to protect the vulnerable, with new technologies that come on board, we always engage those new technologies through the lens of serving our neighbor and serving Christ. And that's going to change the decision making, I mean, think if social media, when that came on board, if it was a bunch of Christians in the room saying, okay, we've got this thing that kids are going to love, how do we create safeguards so it doesn't hurt them? And how many lives would have been saved from suicide because those guardrails were put in place by Christians living out their vocation in that new emerging technology. But, it's just you always have to have that Christian filter. No matter, there's nothing that a Christian does that shouldn't be governed by their faith in Christ. Like everything ought to say, how do I serve Christ in this situation? Serving burgers at McDonald's, sending satellites into space, creating algorithms for AI, being a soldier in the Defense Department, how do I serve Christ in this situation?
Right. And God has made us with certain gifts, and that's why we ended up in the jobs that we did, right? Like you were two pastors that could easily tell you our call stories, but I've also heard people tell me that their call was to being a financial manager, or their call was to be a teacher. And so it is also important to see where maybe God is calling you to use your specific gifts. And so sometimes you might become a Christian, or you might look more deeply at these Christian ideals and realize I'm actually not as aligned as I thought I would. So to that question of like, should I change my job? I don't know. Maybe with this kind of new, I don't want to say enlightenment, but this new like look at the world perspective, it might be that you might find your call to something else. And maybe it is a call to the church. We always need more volunteers. But
well, I think we have people at church who have like I'm going to be the best usher, and I'm going to welcome people, and that's my vocation. Like, or I'm going to be
a Sunday school teacher.
Yeah, right. And I'm going to, there'll be people who will spend decades teaching the same class year after year as new students come through, and that's their vocation. I think that's important to say about vocation and imitating Christ with what you do in your daily life is there's seasons to it. And so it may be your job for a season, and then in retirement you're like, okay, what's my vocation now? Right. And it's always the question, how do I serve Christ now? And maybe it's I'm gonna be a grandparent so that my kids can work and not have to pay for childcare, and I can impart values to my grandkids as they grow. Right. A lot of people choose that, or I'm gonna volunteer on this board, or I'm going to volunteer for the city, or in community. That you're just always asking, how can I serve Christ in this season of my life, using the gifts so that I can imitate Christ.
Right. And to consider, these different seasons and different roles, and in different seasons you have your job, but you're also a parent, or you also volunteer. And so to also find like this harmony between the many different roles and the many different hats that you might play on any given day or any given week. And so to also see Christ in all of it. And so do you want to share your call story? When did you know you wanted to be a pastor?
I knew I wanted to be a pastor when I was 14 years old. I didn't know what it meant really. But I just felt the call to, I want to serve. And I think, if I think about how I live out that call, it's really, it changes in seasons, right? Like right now, I'm like, well, I have a staff of 25 people, and their livelihood depends on this church. And, how do I, in my position, bring out the best in them and help them thrive in their gifts, right? Like I think of you and being your supervisor, like what does it mean to cultivate the gifts you have for not just the church now, but also for how you'll serve this church or other churches in the future. Like I want you to have those opportunities. And part of how I see my call of serving Christ now is to identify the gifts in my people and lift them up.
Right. And so this is just a note of encouragement to also leave that if you don't know what your vocation is, like, it might be simpler than you think.
Yeah.
And it's okay to reach out to pastors like us to possibly discern that.
But we all have a vocation, and whatever we do, we serve Christ.